Everything changed in a split second when, at a construction site, a crane suddenly failed and dropped a huge steel beam right over a little girl who was just playing around. The heavy beam was about to flatten her like a pancake, and she couldn't do anything about it. Meanwhile, an awkward-looking boy happened to walk by and saw what was happening. Shocked, but without a second thought, he sprinted as fast as he could and managed to push the girl out of the way just in time. But instead, the beam crashed down on him, and he was killed like a dog just minutes after he had narrowly avoided a typical isekai truck accident. He died right there, not exactly the way he ever imagined, but instead of heading to heaven or hell, he found himself floating in total darkness, like deep inside a black hole. His confusion only got worse when the god of death suddenly appeared and started yelling at him. After a long, awkward conversation, Death decided to give him another shot by reincarnating him somewhere better. The next thing he knew, he wasn't in that dark place or even human. He'd come back as a demon, looking about the same age as before. While he was still freaking out over his new body and appearance, a demon girl came out of nowhere and stabbed him in the back. Turns out, she was his bastard sister, and she clearly wanted him gone. Before she could finish the job, another person jumped in and stopped her. This newcomer walked over and offered him a bottle, saying it was a healing potion. But after he took a sip, he immediately threw up, realizing too late that it was actually poison. Soon enough, he figured out that's another sibling of him, and she wanted him dead too. Just when things couldn't get any crazier, their dad showed up, the cruel demon king himself. Hearing the commotion, he came to find out the reason, only to become furious and beat the three of them nearly to death. However, the protagonist didn't die, even after being stabbed, poisoned, and beaten. Instead, he woke up after a few hours of rest, showing no signs of injury. He soon realized that his body could regenerate on a completely different level, and he might actually be immortal. The protagonist's name in this story is Kangxi, who's been reincarnated into the body of Kella, the weakest son of the Demon Lord. And as I said before, those demons who have tried to kill him for 99th time actually are his own siblings, Seldera and Tarme. The reason he woke up screaming was because a memory from Kella's childhood popped into Kangxi's mind by accident. In that memory, he came running with tears in his eyes, complaining about how Caldera had poked him with a fork and how Tarme had poisoned his food again. Normally, his mother tried to comfort him, but in her own, very demon-like way, she told Kella that he should get back at them, just like a proper demon would. Unfortunately, her advice didn't help at all. Kella just started crying even harder, saying that if he tried anything, his siblings would definitely kill him. But it seemed like his mom had a backup plan. She told him, if they want to kill you, just beat them to it and kill them first. Simple as that. Kella was a gentle soul, though, even for a demon, and what his mom was saying just didn't sit right with him. That's when his mother decided to share a secret about Kella's father, the Demon King. Apparently, he'd killed 12 of his own siblings without hesitation, just to become the Demon Lord. Kella's mom wasn't actually telling him to become like his dad, but she pointed out that if someone was threatening Kella's life, it was better for him to act first. To really make her point, she suddenly whipped out a dagger and stabbed Kella right in the chest. The poor kid was totally caught off guard, but his mom stayed calm, knowing he wouldn't die that easily. Kella, who had started off crying about the pain his siblings caused, ended up bawling even more from the pain in his chest, thanks to his mom's lesson. That's when Kangxi, or I guess I should say Kella, jerked awake, shouting from the nightmare that had just crashed over him that of course was a weird mix of pain, bad memories, and terrifying run-ins with his new siblings and father. He sat there sweating and out of breath, with his personal maid standing nearby. It finally hit Kangxi. He'd really been reincarnated into a demon named Kella's body, and what he'd just seen was one of Kella's childhood memories. He tried to calm himself down and not freak out, reminding himself that at least he had another shot at life. Looking over his new body, Kangxi realized somehow he was completely recovered, like he'd never been hurt at all. He couldn't help but be amazed at how fast Kella could bounce back. Wounds that would take months for a normal human to recover from were gone in no time. Right then, his maid, who looked pretty annoyed and didn't seem too worried about his well-being, grumbled about how much he'd slept this time. She pointed out that it was almost time for the family meal, and he needed to get ready, pronto. As the new owner of Kella's body, Kangxi started searching through his memories for anything about this servant girl, Rin, and the first thing he discovered was, because of Kella's shy personality, he was way more timid than his siblings, and that's probably why pretty much everyone, even his own maid, took advantage of him. For example, the chores Rin was supposed to help with, like getting Kella dressed, but usually ended up being left for Kella to do by himself. Whenever he complained or tried to compare Rin with the other servants his siblings had, Rin always managed to trick him or talk him down with some sneaky tactics. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Rin didn't just refuse to help Kella get dressed, she actually bossed him around, making him do her chores, like cleaning his own room and tidying up his blankets. Meanwhile, she'd just lounge around and even nap in Kella's bed, as if she were the master and he was the servant. And to make things worse, sometimes she wouldn't even show up for days. Instead, she'd leave some random wooden doll in her place, so she could skip out on her duties without anyone noticing. By the time Kangxi finished getting ready, he'd already decided he'd seen more than enough of Rin's antics. He realized that if he kept acting like the old Kella and let everyone treat him like a doormat, life in this world was going to be just as miserable or maybe even worse than before. It didn't take him long to make up his mind. He was the Demon Lord's son now, and things were going to change, even if it meant standing up to people or fighting back when he had to. A few minutes later, Kangchi headed to the dining hall, where his father and siblings were already seated around the table, waiting to eat. The moment he walked in, his father fixed him with a stern glare and demanded to know why he was late. The Demon Lord's presence was intimidating enough, but his tone made Kangchi's nerves spike. Still, he managed to keep his cool, hurried over to his seat, and apologized for being late. But he barely had time to settle in before his sneaky sister wasted no time. She flung a dagger right at him, and it stuck in his leg without hesitation. The boy didn't expect to be treated like this right in front of his scary dad, and he couldn't hide how much it hurt. His reaction just made Caldera and even her maid laugh at him, while they casually told him not to hesitate and just eat his food. Kangchi wanted to do something, but he was afraid they'd figure out he wasn't really Kella, and things would get even worse. So he decided to tough it out for now and tried to eat with a fake thanks. As soon as he took his first bite, Kangchi realized the food didn't taste normal at all. It was more like poisoned soup. That's when Tarmi smiled at him and proudly announced that she'd made it herself, just for Kella. Unlike last time, the poison wasn't strong enough to threaten the protagonist's life, or maybe Tarmi just wanted to mess with him. Either way, Kangchi thanked her for making the food. Right then, it became clear to Kangchi that these demons weren't his family, they were more like his worst enemies. He'd already decided to put an end to all this, and now he was even more determined to stop the bullying and suffering. Just like Kella's mom suggested, he figured it was time to return the favor, like a real demon would. He grabbed the poisonous soup Tarmi made and called out to Caldera. Without warning, he threw the bowl of soup right at Caldera's face, telling her she should taste what Tarmi had worked so hard to make for him. The next moment, he yanked Caldera's dagger out of his leg and, without a second thought, stabbed it right into Tarmi's shoulder, telling her it was a special gift from Caldera for both of them. His father, the Demon Lord, was completely shocked by Kella's reaction, because he'd never dared to act like this before, but that wasn't the end of it for the demon boy. Almost like he was possessed, he put both hands under the table and in a split second, flipped it over, not caring at all about what would happen next. This time everyone in the room was left speechless, stunned that Kella actually had guts to do something so wild. You see, it had only been a day since Kangchi was reincarnated here, but he just couldn't stand living like that, no matter what. Time passed, and a few hours later, Kella was walking around the castle with a satisfied grin, totally happy with how his first attempt at changing things had gone, even though he still got a good beating to death from the Demon Lord afterward. Not long after, Kella found a quiet spot to sit, once again amazed at how fast he could actually heal from deadly wounds. Staring at his demonic hand, he decided to see it as a perk of being the Demon Lord's son. Rin had been quietly watching him from behind until she suddenly snapped Kella out of his thoughts by reminding him that he needed to go to his demonic power class. With a cold, annoyed look, Kella shot back, telling Rin to stop bossing him around like she was in charge. That really freaked her out, and she started wondering what had gotten into Kella. After all, she was just reminding him about class. Even though he shut Rin up for no real reason, the new Kella started digging through old memories, hoping to figure out what this class was about. Of course, just like everything else in Kella's life, it turned out to be another excuse for him to get bullied and beaten up. Still, Kangchi figured he couldn't skip it forever, so he decided to go anyway. After a while, he arrived at the open field classroom, where 9 students were already lined up, waiting for the professor to finish discussing Tarmi and Caldera's absence, as they were nowhere to be found. Kella joined them, standing tall like the rest while keeping a close eye on the demons beside him. From Kella's memories, Kangchi already knew these guys were just as nasty and ruthless as his siblings. In one of his memories, he witnessed how Kella was forced to do one-on-one combat practice, where he was too scared to use his skills, and his opponent, a brown-haired demon, showed no mercy as he hit the defenseless boy, not caring that he was striking the Demon Lord's own child. It wasn't just him, though. Everyone seemed to enjoy watching Kella get beaten up, there and every day, like it was some kind of game. Still, no one loved it more than his siblings, who would have been happier if their pathetic brother just died. Back then, just to make things more interesting for everyone, Caldera walked over and asked Kella's opponent why he was going so easy on her brother, which caught him off guard. With a smirk, she gave the demon permission to go all out and use all his powers on Kella, without caring about his status. Of course that demon, who dreamed of having a child with Caldera, blushed and felt proud that he could follow her instructions, all in an effort to impress her. In a heartbeat, he started beating the already hopeless boy again, this time with everything he had. During this one-sided fight, Kella couldn't help but cry out for help, but nobody stepped in to stop his pain. Remembering this made Kangchi's blood boil, because he believed Kella wasn't weak, he just didn't want to hurt anyone because he was too soft-hearted. But for Kangchi, things were different now. He wasn't as soft as Kella and couldn't stand being humiliated. Kang-chi decided it was time to use Kella's full power properly and change everything, including his reputation, so that no one would ever dare mock him again. Just then, the professor interrupted his thoughts by asking who had sparred last time. That ugly demon immediately piped up, "It was me and Kella." Without missing a beat, Rude, the annoying demon, added in a mocking voice, "Oh, I should have said, Sir Kella, my bad." You could tell Kella was irritated by the humiliation, but he kept quiet, clearly planning to pick a better moment to respond. A minute later, the two of them stood face to face and ready to fight, while the rest of the students gathered in a loose circle, keeping a safe distance. Just like before, Rude used his mana to turn his hands into weapons, grinning smugly as if he was about to have fun beating Kella up again. The other demon students were thinking the same thing, waiting to watch Kella cry for help like last time. The sound of their laughter got under Kella's skin, confirming what he already suspected about them. Rude's non-stop smirk right before the match made Kella remember something from his own past. To be honest, our main character's life wasn't so different from Kella's. He'd always been looked down on because he was poor and powerless, the kind of kid who got bullied and beaten up for no reason. All of a sudden, that memory hit Kang-chi hard, reaching something deep inside him. Without warning, a surge of blue energy burst around his body, a powerful aura he'd never used before. It was clear that Kang-chi wasn't about to let history repeat itself. When Kella's aura flared up, Rude's grin vanished in an instant, replaced by a look of total shock because he'd never seen Kella look so fierce before. The rest of the demons weren't any different. They were all stunned to see Kella suddenly change and pour out so much mana. Things went from bad to worse for Rude when he realized he couldn't even move. The pressure coming off Kella was so intense it pinned him in place. Before Rude could even get his bearings, Kella shot forward, fueled by the pain of both his own and Kella's past. In a blur, Kella landed a punch right to Rude's face, so hard that Rude lost a bunch of teeth and probably broke his jaw. But that wasn't all. Rude hit the ground with such force that he smashed a hole into it, cracks spiderwebbing out across the floor. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. The same guy everyone thought was the weakest demon had just pulled off a move nobody would have dreamed of, leaving everyone standing there, mouths hanging open. Even the sneaky professor, the one who kept making Kella fight until he got beaten up, was completely floored. He stared at Kella, wondering where in the world that kind of power had come from all of a sudden. Rude, left lying on the ground with just a few teeth, a broken jaw and his little horn bent, looked up helplessly. Kella stood over him, his voice low and menacing as he demanded, "How dare you mock the son of the Demon King like that?" Rude started trembling, terrified he might actually lose his life. He began begging Kella for forgiveness, and Kella finally decided to let him go, but only on one condition, that Rude never mess up in front of him again. This side of Kella completely freaked out the other demons. They just stood there in shock, unable to believe this was the same loser they'd seen the day before. Without another word, Kella turned and walked back to his spot, glancing at the professor, who looked absolutely terrified, like he thought he might be next. Kella told him to hurry up and get on with the lesson instead of wasting everyone's time, and the professor didn't dare argue. Meanwhile, Rin, Kella's personal maid, had been watching the whole thing. She couldn't help but notice that something was different about her master. It was as clear as day. This wasn't the same Kella she'd known, and he even seemed different from how he was just yesterday. But Rin and those weak demons weren't the only one who'd noticed the change. Farther away, watching from a distance, was none other than Kella's father, the Demon King himself. He was just as surprised as everyone else, seeing how much Kella's behavior had changed, especially considering his recent outburst in the dining hall. For a moment, even the Demon King was left speechless. The scene shifts to another side of the Demon King's castle, where Caldera and Tarm, who, by the way, I thought was a girl but is actually a boy, were taking a special bath together. It was supposed to help them heal up and recover faster from their injuries after fighting Kella in dining hall. Caldera was furious, yelling and complaining about Kella's unexpected behavior. Tarmi, meanwhile, was trying to get her to calm down and focus on their recovery, reminding her that neither of them had Kella's crazy fast healing ability, so they couldn't afford any distractions. But that only made Caldera even more upset. She started shouting louder, demanding to know why Kella was the only one who could bounce back from deadly wounds only in a few hours. Trying to smooth things over, Tarmi shared his thoughts, hoping it would help his sister understand what was going on. He admitted he wasn't sure exactly what had happened, but judging by Kella's recent actions, which, let's be honest, were the reason they were both so banged up, he was convinced something had changed in Kella. It was like he'd become a completely different person overnight. In the middle of all that chaos, though, Tarmi noticed something that really threw him for a loop, and honestly, it worried him even more. He caught a glimpse of their father, the Demon King, who, as far as Tarm could remember, had never smiled before. But right then, for the first time ever, he saw their father actually grinning. Hearing this again made the naked Caldera lose her temper even more. She yelled, wondering why their father would smile at Kella's stupid behavior. The same question was bugging Tarmi too, and he didn't have an answer, but he knew it wasn't something they could just ignore. Seldera demanded a solution, asking what Tarmi thought they should do about it. Despite appearances, these silver-haired siblings didn't usually get along well. They were more like cats and dogs, really. When Tarmi brought this up, Seldera's eyes widened, realizing what he was hinting at. That's when Tarmi finished his thought, saying it was time for them to join forces and work together and not separately, to take Kella down by any means necessary, before he caught their father's attention again. Seldera actually liked the plan, at least for now, and promised she'd do whatever it took to stop Kella before he ruined their reputation with their father and embarrassed them even more. They both agreed, feeling sure that if they teamed up, taking Kella out would be easy. Meanwhile, on the other side of the castle, the very person they were plotting to kill, Kella, suddenly felt a chill. It wasn't because he sensed danger, but because he caught sight of a picture of the previous demon lord, who looked way too demonic for his liking. It was actually a magical 3D portrait of Demon Lord Turk Khaldun, which the professor had conjured up in class with a spell to show everyone exactly who he was talking about. The image alone, especially with that creepy third eye on his forehead, really freaked Kella out. According to the professor, Demon King Turk was the strongest in his time, but he was killed in a cowardly plot linked to the Human Heaven Guild. Since then, other opportunistic guilds had swarmed around the kingdom, trying to take advantage of his absence. Something about that story felt oddly familiar to Kang-chi. He realized he'd seen flashes of it in Kella's memories. Apparently, the old Kella had wanted to escape the demon lands because his life was so rough, but with those bloodthirsty human guilds camped out nearby, he had no choice but to stick it out and suffer. Kang-chi wasn't sure if the real villains here were the humans or the demons, but either way, he had a really bad feeling about all of it. The professor took this chance to remind everyone about the threat from the humans, warning that they could attack their homeland any day now. He brought this up to motivate all the students to really focus in combat class, hoping they'd learn something useful to help Demon King Hell against the humans. And of course, it worked. Everyone started shouting at the top of their lungs, promising to do whatever it took to protect their kingdom. The only one who stayed quiet was our main character. He didn't want to commit to any side of this fight before he understood what was really going on. When class was over, Kella went back to his favorite spot, sitting on the edge of the castle's tower. His mind was a mess. He kept thinking about how he could escape the castle, not because of the humans, but because he was seriously worried his siblings might actually find a way to kill him when he least expected it, especially after what happened in the dining hall. His new dad, King Hell, wasn't much better, always finding some excuse to beat him half to death. Suddenly, Kella, without turning his head, asked Rin, "Is it true that my father's leaving the castle with an army to face the humans in 3 days?" Rin nodded and confirmed it. Since Kella didn't have anyone else to talk to, he threw another question her way, wondering if she knew about the castle's one major weakness. Rin just looked confused, not having a clue what he was talking about, so Kella answered his own question. He pointed out that there's no mapmaker or architect around who can help them use the land to their advantage in battle. Because of that, the humans had been able to sneak through all the neglected parts of their territory and use it against them. Feeling pretty sure of himself, like he was born for this, Kella announced that he would take on the important job of mapping out the whole area for the demons. He said his reason for helping wasn't just loyalty to the Demon King, but also his own desire to make a name for himself. But before he could do any of that, Kella knew he needed to find a safe spot where no one would be watching or interfering, so he could work on his secret mission in peace. Out of nowhere, an idea popped into Kella's not-so-handsome head, and he started yelling at poor Rin again. He told her to set up a secret office for him in the castle's basement right away. He made it clear that, no matter what, his dad couldn't find out about it. A little while later, somewhere inside the castle, King Hell was taking a special bath surrounded by what looked like pink flames or steam, or whatever it was. But he wasn't really focused on the bath. The only thing on his mind was Kella's weird behavior lately. The Demon King couldn't help but wonder if his son was up to something sneaky. That thought bugged him so much that he cut his bath short, realizing he needed to check out what was really going on. Meanwhile, Kella, who had no idea what was coming his way, looked downright annoyed and even a bit mad when he saw the office Rin had put together for him. He'd expected something a lot fancier, something that actually fit for the son of the Demon King. Rin, who looked pretty nervous after seeing Kella's reaction, quickly explained that she had to get everything ready fast and keep it a secret, which is why the place wasn't as nice as he wanted. Kella knew that was true, but he was giving the maid a hard time on purpose. He figured if Rin ever got the upper hand, she'd definitely take advantage of it. His little mind game seemed to be working, making Rin realize she couldn't just act carelessly around this new, unpredictable Kella. Surprisingly, Kella's wild behavior had an unexpected side effect. It made Rin start to see him as an attractive demon, someone who was slowly becoming the kind of guy she wanted for a husband. But Kella didn't let her daydream for long and told her to get him a cup of coffee right away. She rushed out in a flash, slamming the door behind her. Actually, Kella didn't want coffee. He just needed some privacy to focus on what he was doing. He looked over the map of demon territory that Rin had given him earlier, trying to spot any weak points and figure out how to fix them. At the same time, Rin was running through the castle halls, muttering, "Coffee, coffee." Suddenly she stopped, because she realized she'd never even heard the word coffee before and had no idea what it was or how to get it. Before she could figure it out, someone called her name. Of course, it was the Demon King himself, stopping her to ask what she was doing in the basement without her master. Before she could answer, the king cut her off and asked where his son, Kella, was. Rin froze, her body shaking as she stuttered and failed to give a straight answer. Her response started getting on King Hell's nerves, and this time he demanded a real answer. Rin wanted to protect her master's secret, but she wasn't sure she wanted to risk her own life for it. Back in Kella's secret office, he was happily working away, making notes on what needed to be changed, totally clueless that his dad was on his way. Kella was actually enjoying this secret project. Designing maps and dungeons for gaming studies was his thing, and this felt pretty much the same. Honestly, nothing made him happier than this kind of work. But of course, his good mood didn't last. Suddenly, the door got smashed open in an instant. The Demon King stormed in, looking furious, and demanded to know how Kella dared to set up a secret office without telling him. Kella was completely caught off guard, too shocked to do anything but wonder how his dad even found out. Things went from bad to worse when his angry, ruthless dad punched a new hole right through his son's stomach with his left hand. The reason for this wild attack was a huge misunderstanding. King Hell thought Kella was using the office to plot a rebellion and take the throne for himself. Kella had never even thought of that, but he was in so much pain and shock that he couldn't explain, especially with his dad's massive hand going right through him. The protagonist realized that if he didn't clear things up right now, he might actually get killed for real this time. As a last-ditch effort, he desperately grabbed the map he'd been working on and showed it to his dad. King Hell, almost like he wanted to give him a shot, asked Kella to explain what it was and why he was looking at it. With a shaky voice, Kella asked him to look at the outskirts of their castle, pointing out how weak and exposed they were for the upcoming battle against the humans. He explained that if they could change the landscape around them the way he'd drawn it on the map, it could really help them turn things around in the fight. Kella did his best to convince his dad that he wasn't plotting against him. In fact, he was trying to help. Finally, his words started to make sense to King Hell. In one quick move, the king yanked his hand out of Kella's body and dropped him to the ground. With a much calmer voice, he asked Kella why he was working on something this important in secret. Kella admitted he was scared his dad wouldn't let him do it if he asked for permission up front. He pointed to the edited map and said he just wanted to finish it and show him afterward. Hearing this, King Hell started to realize he'd jumped to conclusions about Kella without listening. Kella went on, saying he wanted to play a big part as the Demon King's son in the upcoming battle. After that, they just stared at each other in silence for a few seconds. Kella's attitude freaked Rin out again. She was sure his dad was about to finish him off because of it. But, to her surprise, the Demon King just asked calmly, "How long do you think it'll take to finish?" Even Kella didn't see that coming, and he was so thrown off he didn't even get what his dad was asking at first. Seeing his confused look, King Hell repeated the question, this time asking how many days Kella needed to finish designing the new map. Relieved that his dad finally understood him, Kella held up 5 fingers without saying anything else. But this only disappointed his father, who said, "The fight starts in 3 days. If you need 5, there's no point after all this trouble." He turned to leave, clearly thinking it was better to just rely on his own strength and plans. That's when Kella quickly clarified that he meant 5 hours, not 5 days, which made King Hell stop right in his tracks. Now feeling more confident, Kella said they could use the time left before the battle to finish building and changing the landscape just like he'd planned. But he had one request. He wanted to be the one in charge of the whole thing. His dad didn't rush to answer, not saying yes or no right away. After a few moments of thinking it over, King Hell finally agreed to let Kella take charge and do things his way. But as King Hell was leaving Kella's office, he stopped to remind Kella of something important. He said that if Kella's plan and all his sweet talk didn't work out, he'd personally tear Kella to pieces and make stew out of him. Not as his dad, but as the Demon King. Still, Kella really believed he could pull it off, so he actually appreciated the trust his dad was putting in him. Without any more back and forth, King Hell left the room, and Kella couldn't have been happier about how things worked out. But before he could really enjoy his victory, he suddenly lost control of all the blood in his injured stomach and threw everything up that he'd been holding in. Even then, he couldn't help but think about how his own dad almost killed him, without even knowing what he was up to. Rin was super impressed by Kella again, amazed at how he managed to get the cruel Demon King to trust him. But Kella didn't let her relax for long. He yelled for her to help him get to the med room. Time flew by, and about 5 hours later, Kella was fully healed and feeling great because he'd finished his work just like he promised. Soon enough, on his command, the demon army got together and started a massive construction project. Meanwhile, the mages set up illusion magic outside the construction zone to keep everything hidden from human eyes, and they got to work changing the geography exactly the way Kella had designed on his map. Kella was feeling super confident, convinced everything was going just the way he planned and it was perfect. Not too far from the Demon King's castle, over at the humans' camp, an urgent report came in for the Heaven Guild Master, Hermeson, and it really caught him off guard. A soldier reported that they noticed the demons were making big changes near the castle and using illusion magic to hide it and trick them. Hermeson couldn't help but wonder what the demons were up to. However, when that man asked for permission to attack and stop the demons, Hermeson shut it down right away. The old man saw it as a desperate, pointless move from demons, because he was sure, no matter what, the demons didn't stand a chance against the strongest unit ever formed, the Talcon Squad. In fact, humans had started putting together Talcon Squad decades ago, and now it was finally ready, just in time to go up against the Demon King's army. Ugly as ever, Hermeson was bursting with pride in human strength, saying it was finally time to wipe out the demons for good, especially Demon King Hell, with this elite squad. The squad Hermeson was talking about, led by a dragon rider general and a lot of horse cavalry, was still 2 days away from the battlefield. Their leader, General Killman, wanted to pump up his soldiers, so he started shouting, repeating the old man's words about ending the Demon King's threat once and for all. Of course, his speech worked. The troops started shouting along and pushed themselves to move even faster toward their final goal. The squad's deputy, a skilled woman named Sreels, watched Killman up in the sky, really impressed by his leadership. The man behind her suddenly called her name respectfully and asked what she thought. Would they be able to defeat the Demon Lord's army? Sreels didn't hesitate at all to respond. She answered with a big smile, saying there was no way their elite squad could lose to the demons, no matter what. The scene shifted back to the Demon Lord's castle, where he sat on his throne, deep in thought about Kella's plan. He knew his son wasn't exactly wrong about the disadvantage of their geography, but at the same time, he could tell Kella's plan was still missing something. The main reason he couldn't be too picky about all this was because of his own body. That was almost at its limit. It seemed King Hell was still carrying injuries from past battles, and he hadn't fully recovered yet. Still, no matter what, he couldn't avoid the upcoming fight. There was only 1 day left before the battle, and the mages were hurrying to move things around, while the other demons were working hard to carry out Kella's orders. Kella himself was watching everything closely from behind a window, making sure everything was going as he'd planned. It all felt familiar, just like what he used to do when he was human. But now, seeing and managing things in person felt totally different. Kella could hardly wait to see what would happen when his father and the humans finally clashed. The thought of only 1 day left, and knowing that by tomorrow everything would be decided, made him feel even more excited to see the results. Finally, the day of the battle had arrived, and the Talcon squad joined the humans' camp near the Demon King's territory. Hermeson immediately went to greet General Killman and his team, and Killman told him that his squad was ready to attack the demons at any moment. Hearing this made Hermeson smile, and he declared that it was finally time to put an end to the Demon Lord's pathetic life. General Killman started yelling for the guildmaster and tried to fire up his squad again. Suddenly, before anyone could react, a small black and blue circle of light appeared in the middle of their meeting. The circle quickly grew bigger, catching everyone's attention. Killman was the first to realize that it was dangerous and that they didn't have much time to respond. He immediately ordered everyone to get into a defensive formation because a surprise attack was coming. Within seconds, the circle exploded with a bright blue light, and smoke and dust filled the area. Not just the Talcon squad and their commander, but even the other humans, including Hermeson, were left stunned by what they saw. But it wasn't just the sudden explosion that shocked them. It was the person who stepped out of the smoke that really caught them off guard. It was obvious from his marked horn that the person was none other than Demon King Hell himself, who showed up alone right in the middle of the enemy camp. But he wasn't there just for the fun of it. It was all part of Kella's plan, whether that meant sending him on a suicide mission or using teleportation magic as a strategy to win the war. At first, Kella's father had his doubts about teleporting into the enemy base all by himself. Seldera, who was also there, said it was the worst idea and that he was putting his life on the line for nothing. Tarmi agreed. It was just too risky, even for someone as strong as their dad. But their father didn't like their responses at all. He felt like they were questioning the Demon King's power. This time, Kella's siblings were genuinely worried about their dad, especially since he wasn't in top shape. But, as usual, their tough dad saw their concerns as disrespect to his strength and authority, which only made him angrier. Without another word, King Hell said he'd do what Kella suggested and teleport straight into the enemy base. That was in the past, but now in the present, King Hell had already teleported to the spot Kella wanted and loudly announced that he was there to wipe out every single one of the humans. As expected, the Demon King's sudden appearance, and the powerful energy radiating from him, shocked everyone, even General Killman. But as a seasoned warrior, Killman quickly pulled himself together and immediately ordered his men to get ready for an all-out fight, launching a full attack on the spot. But King Hell didn't show up unprepared. Just like before, he unleashed a burst of magic, causing an explosion all around him to keep anyone from charging at him recklessly. Meanwhile, back at the Demon King's castle, Kella had gathered every demon he could find in one place. As the one in charge, he was doing everything he could to make sure things went smoothly and that everyone was ready for battle. After making sure all the preparations were done, and knowing his father couldn't hold off all the humans forever, Kella gave the official order to attack. The demons, who had been waiting for this moment for ages, started marching at full speed, charging ahead to help their lord. Not long after that, they reached the humans, many of whom still weren't fully ready to face the demons without clear orders. Some demons had even dug holes in the ground and ambushed them, catching humans in front line totally caught off guard, but they still tried their best to keep the demons from getting any closer to their camp. Kella, who was leading the demons without jumping into the fight himself, stood on top of a building, looking a bit nervous about how things might turn out. Still, he was almost confident in his plan and believed they'd probably win this battle. Just then, someone, or rather, two people, showed up behind him and said, "There you are, Kella. I don't know what happened to make you change like this, but you're not going to survive to see how this battle ends." It was, of course, his siblings, Seldera and Tarme, who had taken the chance to finally confront Kella and settle things with him once and for all. Kella looked genuinely shocked. He'd completely forgotten about his ruthless siblings, and now, cornered by them, he acted terrified. Without hesitating, Tarme swung his whip, aiming right at Kella while flashing a wicked grin and saying there was no place for him here. The poisonous whip hit Kella in the stomach, reopening the wound his dad and Seldera had made earlier. Even though Kella had been hurt there before, he still couldn't handle the pain this time. All he could do was stare in disbelief. But that wasn't the end of it. Tarm told Seldera to finish the job, and Seldera rushed at Kella, clearly up to something so cruel that even Kella's insane healing couldn't save him. In the next instant, to everyone's shock, she sliced off Kella's head in one swift move. With their plan working, both of them started laughing, knowing Kella wouldn't be causing them any more problems. Meanwhile, Kella's head was flying through the air, still conscious. He realized what he'd feared most had actually happened, and at the worst possible time. He couldn't help but wonder if his short life and his second shot at living properly had just ended like this. The force of that blow sent Kella's body tumbling off the edge of the building, making him fall from that great height. His cruel siblings just stood there, watching as his lifeless body plummeted toward the ground. His head, which had been severed, was heavier and rolled through the air like a ball, heading straight down faster. In a matter of seconds, both his body and head hit the ground with a sickening thud, and Kella's blood splattered everywhere. Strangely, Kella's consciousness wasn't in his body, but in his head. Even after passing some time, he stared up in shock at the top of the building. His siblings were still there, grinning and clearly happy that they had finally gotten rid of their annoying brother. But the next surprise came when Tarme told Seldera that they should go help their father in the battle. Right then, Seldera suddenly pulled out a dagger and tried to stab Tarme in the back. She went through with her plan, hoping to get rid of her second brother right after dealing with Kella. Her sneaky attack managed to wound Tarme's shoulder, and she jumped back, pointing out that if Tarme hadn't turned at the last second, it would have been his heart she stabbed. Tarme was stunned, not just by Seldera's betrayal, but also by the fact that she used their mother's dagger for the attack, a weapon they were all forbidden to use. But Seldera didn't care about any of those rules. She believed weapons were made to be used, and this was the perfect time to use that one. Still, Tarme couldn't believe she'd used something so precious to them all just to try and kill him. Once again, Seldera didn't care about her brother's words. She was completely focused on removing the last obstacle in her way and becoming the only person left who could claim the title of Demon King. Just thinking about it made her blush with excitement and feel like she was already on top of the world. Her attitude and smug expression really got under Tarm's skin. Furious, he charged at his spiteful sister, deciding to take action right then and there instead of waiting. On the other side, Seldera didn't hesitate either. She rushed at him, ready to finish the job and secure her place as the sole successor. They collided in a brutal fight to the death. neither of them even considering that their father might need their help at that very moment. The chaos and intense battle between Seldera and Tarm on the rooftop didn't go unnoticed by Kella, who, against all odds, was somehow still alive. But it looked like his final moments had arrived. He started to lose consciousness, his last thoughts swirling as he wondered how his siblings could be so heartless. It took a lot for someone like him to die, but eventually, Kella's second life faded away. He collapsed to the ground, alone, with no one there to help or even notice. Or, at least, that's how it seemed. Suddenly, the ground beneath him began to crack in a strange way. In the next moment, an opening appeared, created by his loyal servant, and Kella's body, along with his head, dropped down into the underground. It seemed like it was already too late to save him, but his servant quickly picked up Kella's head and dragged his body into a corner, determined to do whatever she could. Trying her best not to make any noise and attract attention, Rin found a quiet spot nearby. She carefully held Kella's head in her arms and managed to reattach it to his body. The whole thing left her completely horrified. Her hands were shaking hard just from seeing her master, the one she'd served for as long as she could remember, in such a terrible state. At the meantime, a little further away from the castle, a large group of demons was making their way toward a secret pathway, planning to ambush the humans from an unexpected direction. The path they were using led to a kind of magical portal, one that would let them slip behind the human army without being noticed. But as soon as they stepped through the portal, they realized something was wrong. The humans were already waiting for them. A huge part of the human army was gathered right in front of the portal, and the second the demons stepped out, the humans attacked them with everything they had. The demons found themselves in a really tough spot, but they didn't think about running away. Instead, they decided to stand their ground and fight for the honor of demonkind. The two sides clashed, and it was clear that neither was willing to back down, no matter what. Off to the side, there was a short but epic fight going on between the Demon King and Kilman's dragon. This dragon wasn't just a fancy ride for Kilman, it was a powerful creature with the ability to breathe fire. With a swift move, the dragon aimed straight at the Demon King and blasted her with a huge stream of fire at full force. At first, King Hell seemed caught off guard when he found himself targeted by the dragon's fiery breath, but it was all just an act. He dodged the attack at the last second and used the opportunity to catch the dragon off guard instead. It only took him a split second to take down that mighty dragon effortlessly, and that's exactly what he did. Right after that, Kilman showed up, completely stunned to see his beloved mount dead, unable to do anything to save it. With no time to lose, all the humans pooled their magical powers and launched a massive attack, not just at the Demon King, but also at the growing number of demons closing in on their base. In the middle of all the dust and chaos, it looked like the Demon King was still standing. For a moment, Kilman wondered if maybe all those attacks had actually hurt him badly. But then, someone behind Kilman shouted a warning, having spotted that the Demon King was still moving. As the dust and smoke began to clear, King Hell became visible again, but he was far from unharmed. And on top of that, his appearance had shifted into his ultimate wild form, looking even more terrifying than before. Like most of the other humans, Kilman was seeing the Demon King's true power in person for the first time, realizing that the stories he'd only read in books were actually true. Srills had a similar reaction. She was just as horrified as Kilman by the sight of King Hell in his final monstrous form. Those two were among the highest-ranking members, but things were even worse for everyone else. Some soldiers were so terrified that they literally wet themselves, and a lot of them couldn't stop shaking with fear. After seeing how scared everyone was, Srills tried to rally the troops. She shouted at them, reminding everyone that this was no time to give in to fear. All they needed to do was to find their warrior spirit and fight back. What Srills didn't notice, though, was General Kilman's condition. He wanted to step up and face the Demon King, but just like everyone else, he just couldn't stop his body from trembling uncontrollably. Even though all the humans looked absolutely terrified, and it would have been the perfect moment for King Hell to take advantage, he didn't rush in. Instead, he paused for a moment, thinking about Kella's whole plan. From King Hell's point of view, there was one big flaw in the plan, jumping right into the middle of the battle with no escape route, not just for himself but for all the other demons too. That was a serious downside, but right now wasn't the time to dwell on it. Besides, it didn't really matter anymore. As the Demon King, Hell would rather die fighting here on the battlefield than try to run away like a coward. Slowly but steadily, the Demon King kept walking toward the human army. His mind was completely wrapped up in thoughts about Kella. Even with the flaws in Kella's plan, King Hell realized that Kella now looked very different from the pathetic boy he had always perceived him to be. Again, this wasn't the time to admit his mistakes or regret how he'd treated his son. There were more urgent things to focus on right now. Without wasting another second, King Hell went all out, determined to wipe out everyone in sight as quickly as possible. As his power surged and his aura exploded with intensity, Kilman instantly sensed how dangerous things had become. But instead of backing away, even though he was terrified, Kilman decided to risk his life and do whatever it took to stop the Demon King. King Hell saw this coming, and in a flash, their legendary battle began. The clash between them sent shockwaves through the sky, visible from miles away. That was the chaos happening on the battlefield, but things were totally different underground for Rin. She was still shaking with fear at the thought of losing Kella. Desperate, she prayed to every god she could think of, begging them to bring her master back to life. But even after a few minutes passed, nothing strange happened. Kella still looked completely dead this time. All of this coming from underground and finding and reattaching Kella's head wasn't random. It was actually part of Kella's plan. They had even practiced and experimented for this situation a few days earlier, starting by cutting off Kella's hand and reattaching it. The whole thing was disgusting for Rin, but she had no choice but to follow Kella's orders. Back then, both of them noticed that it took only a few seconds after reattaching the arm for it to start functioning as if it had never been cut off. That's when a wild idea popped into Kella's mind, and he decided to try the same thing with his head. Rin couldn't help but think he'd lost it, wondering what would happen if he died before they could get his head back on. Still, Kella told her he was determined to go through with it and tried to reassure Rin by saying he needed her, his most trusted servant. They did it, though they didn't show exactly how. And after it worked, Kella, lucky to still be alive, said it was time to move on to the last part of their plan. He told Rin to find his siblings' servants and let them know he was planning to kill his siblings after their father left the castle. Rin's eyes went wide again, looking totally confused and a little annoyed by whatever her master was planning. Still, she decided to go along with it and did exactly as she was told. She found the servant and, as naturally as possible, repeated what Kella had told her to say, pretending she was betraying him. She played the part so well that the other maid didn't even question it and immediately believed her, realizing she had to warn her own master right away. For the second part of her mission, Rin even gave the other maid a tip, saying that Kella's head was his weak spot and cutting it off would get rid of her annoying master for good. The maid bought the story on the spot. It made perfect sense to her, since no living being can survive without its head. Now, in the present, even though everything was going according to plan, Rin was still super worried about Kella's safety. She couldn't stop staring at his face, counting the seconds, just waiting for him to move or tease her again. Out of pure nerves and frustration at his reckless plan, she suddenly called Kella an idiot. Right at that moment, Kella's eyes snapped open and he came back to life, immediately asking how she dared to call him an idiot. That's when Rin realized her master was finally back. On Kella's end, even though he'd just come back to life like it was nothing, he figured out why it took so much longer this time. It was because Seldera's sword was infused with mana, which slowed down his recovery. But in the end, it didn't really matter. He'd survived, just like he planned, and now he was free to do whatever he wanted. Seeing Kella alive in front of her when she'd lost all hope of ever seeing him again, Rin couldn't help herself. She rushed over and hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. Kella, who had no idea just how much Rin had been struggling during those difficult times, blushed awkwardly and, without thinking, pushed her away. But almost immediately, he made a sudden decision. He would break the servant and master contract between them, setting Rin free for good. He softly spoke the words needed to end their bond, releasing her from the ties that had held her. Rin was completely stunned. She was so shocked, she didn't even know what to say. Kella, meanwhile, seemed eager to leave. He told her that from now on, she was free to live her life however she wanted, without having to obey anyone's orders. The smile on his face suddenly made Rin realize something she had never noticed before. As Kella turned to walk away, not waiting for any response from Rin, memories flashed through her mind. Memories of how Kella had always treated her like a friend, not just a servant, ever since they were children. That realization was all it took for her to make up her mind, even as tears kept streaming down her cheeks. She ran after Kella, calling out that she didn't want to say goodbye like this. No matter how much Kella tried to convince her otherwise, she just wouldn't change her mind. Then, the scene shifted to the battlefield, where General Kilman was badly injured and struggling to catch his breath after fighting the Demon King. Strangely, King Hell was in even worse shape. It wasn't clear how, but Kilman and the other humans had not only managed to cut off one of his hands, but they'd also covered his supposedly invincible body with deadly wounds. Even with all those injuries, King Hell was still standing, as if nothing had happened, and Kilman was getting more and more frustrated because he couldn't figure out how to finish him off. In a fight like this, only one thing was certain. The first to lose hope would be the first to fall. Before launching another attack, the Demon King quickly looked around to get a sense of the situation, and realized that almost all of the human army had been wiped out. But it didn't take him long to notice something else. Most of his own demon soldiers were gone too. He glanced at his exposed rib sticking out of his side, then at his severed arm, and couldn't help but wonder why none of his children had come to help him in the fight. He knew that even if just one of them had shown up, things would have turned out much better for him. Still, there was nothing he could do about it now, except to keep fighting with whatever strength he had left. Gathering the last bit of his mana and not caring at all about the consequences, he made a desperate move, unleashing a massive explosion all around him. Not knowing what was happening out on the battlefield, Kella and Rin dashed through the castle's hidden underground tunnel as fast as they could. After what felt like forever, they finally found the secret exit from the Demon King's castle. Kella was over the moon. No matter how the fight between humans and demons turned out, he could slip away unnoticed and live a quiet life, while everyone back at the castle believed he was dead. But before he could even start to celebrate, Rin suddenly jumped in front of him, warning him about danger up ahead. At that exact moment, 3 magical attacks, like bolts of lightning, shot toward them. Thankfully, Rin managed to throw up a defensive shield just in time, stopping all of them. 3 human magicians then revealed their presence. They'd been waiting to ambush the Demon King if he tried to escape, but instead they found his son. Since their sneak attack failed, they came out into the open and blocked Kella and Rin's path. Kella was caught completely off guard. He never expected to run into humans so soon, let alone discover they knew about the castle's secret passage, a secret not even demons were supposed to know. Meanwhile, the magicians started getting ready to attack again, determined not to let any demons slip out through that tunnel. In no time, another round of thunderous magic came flying at Kella and Rin. Just like before, Rin did everything she could to block the attacks, putting up another strong shield to protect them both. Even though Rin was struggling to defend both of them, she told Kella to leave her behind and escape. But Kella knew she wasn't strong enough to hold off the attackers on her own. She'd probably get herself killed if she tried. Still, like a true royal servant, Rin insisted she was willing to risk her life to buy him some time. All of this was really starting to get on Kella's nerves, especially since Rin could only use basic defensive magic, but was still determined to put her life on the line just to give him a chance to get away. He just couldn't bring himself to run without her, especially after noticing her stubborn loyalty and, he had to admit, her stubbornly big butt. Big heart. Anyways, when Rin turned to him, frustrated and demanded to know why he was still standing there wasting time, Kella put a hand on her shoulder. Ignoring her protests, he tossed her back, though not very gently, and yelled at her, asking how she could dare to act so tough in front of him. There was no way he'd let his only royal follower die right before his eyes, so he decided it was his turn to step up and face the humans himself. Rin was completely shocked by Kella's reaction, but there wasn't much she could do except wait and see what would happen next. The magicians, annoyed that their targets were just standing there arguing, decided to take advantage of the moment. Seeing both Kella and Rin wide open, the lead magician launched a swift, powerful attack, hoping to end things for good. But Kella had some hidden powers that only Kang-Chi knew about, which meant he wasn't such an easy target after all. With just a single wave of his hand, Kella effortlessly blocked all the attacks at once. Rin's eyes went wide in shock again, but this time was because she had never seen this side of Kella's true power before. That's when the lead mage realized he'd completely underestimated Kella, just assuming he was someone with weak mana. But he didn't have much time to process his mistake. In a flash, Kella dashed forward, grabbed the mage by the head, and slammed him into the ground as hard as he could. Fired up, Kella looked down at his human opponent and told him it was time to take a closer look and see if anything seemed different now. The mage, still conscious, tried to stall by asking if they could talk things out, but Kella wasn't having it. He yanked the mage's head up and smashed it into the ground again, this time even harder. As expected, the mage either died on the spot or ended up in a coma for years. This time Rin was honestly blown away. She'd always thought Kella was just a powerless boy, so seeing him handle things like this was a total shock. A little farther away, the 2 remaining mages stood frozen in disbelief. They recognized Kella and, just like Rin, had always thought he was some weakling. That's when Kella stood up and declared, "Looks like all your information about me is way off. Maybe you shouldn't trust everything you hear." Realizing things had completely turned around and they might actually be in danger, the 2 mages decided to go all out with their ultimate move, the light spear. It was their strongest attack, but to pull it off, they had to use up every last bit of their mana, which made it a huge risk. With no other options left, they went for it, summoned their most powerful spell, and launched the attack straight at Kella. Rin sensed how serious the danger was and jumped forward, hoping she could do something to help. In less than a blink, the magical spears shot through Kella's body, and one even struck Rin, lodging deep in her shoulder. The pain was excruciating, but that wasn't even the worst part. Kella suddenly realized he couldn't move at all, like he was completely paralyzed. Rin, who had tried so hard to shield Kella again, was shaking. Not from pain or fear, but out of frustration and guilt for failing to protect him this time. The mages, relieved to see their attack hit perfectly, realized they had no mana left to finish off Rin and Kella. But their staffs had a hidden secret. They could split apart, revealing a concealed sword inside. When the first mage stepped forward, ready to get rid of the demons for good, the other one stopped him. With a creepy grin, he said he'd never had a chance to get close to a demon girl before, and now was his chance to live out his twisted fantasy. He moved in on Rin, started touching her face and pressed his elbow against her chest, making her feel even more helpless and vulnerable. Rin was trapped, completely unable to do anything except yell, insisting that she had promised to save herself for someone special. But the mage didn't care at all. He lifted his sword and pressed it against her neck, saying that if she wanted things to go smoothly, she should just cooperate. Those magical spears hadn't just paralyzed their bodies, they seemed to have blocked their powers too. Even seeing how the mages were treating Rin, Kella couldn't do anything to stop them. Kella's reaction, though, made the mages change their minds. They decided to kill Kella first, and then satisfy themselves with Rin. For a split second, Kella's eyes landed on the exit door, just a few meters away. Frustration washed over him. Everything was spiraling out of control, right when he'd been so close to escaping. The cruel mage raised his sword high, aiming to chop off Kella's head. A twisted grin spread across his face. Rin squeezed her eyes shut and screamed from the bottom of her lungs, realizing that her master was about to be killed for real this time. But in that very moment, just before the sword could come down on him, Kella suddenly felt something strange, like time itself had paused for a moment. His eyes snapped open in disbelief as a weird sensation swept over him. He could feel something extraordinary was about to happen, because something completely out of the ordinary was approaching. The powerful presence Kella felt coming his way turned out to be none other than his father, Demon King Hell. Just as he'd feared, Kella started to panic, wondering not only how his dad had wrapped up the war so quickly, but also how he'd discovered what Kella was up to and shown up to punish him. Kella glanced at King Hell, who just stared at him in silence for a few seconds. With a sigh, Kella squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself to get smacked now that his whole escape plan had flopped. But instead of attacking, his father began to speak. He mentioned that he'd fought in countless wars and had always thought through every possible outcome, including losing his own life. Kella honestly had no clue why his dad was bringing this up right now, but before he could figure it out, King Hell kept going. He said he'd tried many times to pick an heir for the throne, but it was never easy. In his opinion, Sildera wasn't right for the job because she never really cared about other fellow demons. As for Tarmi, he just didn't have the drive to be a real demon king. Suddenly, sounding like he barely cared about what his intimidating father was saying, Kella blurted out, "How and why did you even get in here?" King Hell didn't hesitate. He explained that every demon king has the power to pass on his incredible strength to chosen heir from his bloodline before he dies, and that was the whole reason he'd come. Kella, who'd only ever gotten beatings from his dad, was completely stunned. He wasn't even sure he'd heard him right. His father, who seemed more like a 3D image than a real person at this point, suddenly announced that he'd always thought of Kella as weak, but now he'd changed his mind and wanted to pass on his demon lord powers to him. It took Kella a moment to process what was happening, and as soon as he did, he started protesting. He insisted it was all a big misunderstanding and that he wasn't the right person for the job or the power. All Kella ever really wanted was to live his own life, free and on his own terms. But King Hell just ignored all of Kella's protests and got straight to business. He pulled out this strange, glowing sphere, practically overflowing with dark energy, and shoved it toward Kella to transfer everything he had. Kella, completely frozen, paralyzed even in his mind, couldn't do a thing to stop it. He just stood there, wide-eyed, staring at the floating black orb as it drifted closer and closer, unable to even confess that he'd actually betrayed his father. King Hell watched Kella's reaction, but he just figured Kella was in shock for sudden turn of events. That's when he said his final words, telling Kella to become a real demon king and not let his death be for nothing. After that, King Hell closed his eyes for the last time and vanished. It turned out that King Hell's real body was actually elsewhere, and Kella was only talking with his image, illusion, ghost, or whatever it was. He had already been defeated and his head cut off by the humans. How exactly he died was a mystery, even to Shreels, who just arrived. When she finally showed up, everything was over. The Demon King's head was lying on the ground near his body, and General Killman was dead too. His body sprawled a little farther away from the Demon King's lifeless form. Shreels didn't know the whole story, but she believed General Killman had somehow managed to defeat the Demon King all by himself, sacrificing his life in the process. The loss hit her hard, and she couldn't help but wish she'd been there to help him. The few other humans who survived were just as stunned by the scene. But with the great Demon King finally dead and victory in their hands, their shock quickly gave way to celebration. None of them realized that a new fight was about to begin, this time against King Hell's son, who was not only a genius but also possessed incredible healing powers and now carried all of Hell's strength. As Kella absorbed every bit of his father's power, all those magical spears that had been used against him suddenly shattered and began to vanishing, unable to withstand the overwhelming force of Kella's dark energy. Rin, who had expected to see Kella dead, just stared at him in shock, struggling to figure out what had suddenly changed in her usually awkward master. The mages were just as stunned as Rin. None of them could understand how Kella had suddenly tapped into so much dark mana, enough to break free from their light spears. Even Kella himself was confused at first, but as things started to make sense in his head, he realized something huge. He might finally have a shot at living the free life he always wanted, but with a big difference from before. The evidence was right in front of him. His father, the ruthless Demon King, was really gone. Instead of feeling sad or angry about losing his dad, Kella actually felt relieved, even a little happy. For once, there was nobody left to scare him or control his life. On the other hand, the mages, who had been scheming all sorts of evil just moments ago, quickly realized they were in serious trouble. They knew they needed to run before Kella turned his new power on them. But Kella wasn't about to let them off so easily. With this overwhelming darkness now swirling inside him, he decided it was the perfect time to test his new abilities, especially on these humans who'd almost killed him and tried to hurt the girl he cared about most. He was furious about what they'd done to him, but what really enraged him was how they'd treated Rin. If King Hell hadn't shown up when he did, Rin would be facing a much worse fate, and she might even be pregnant with twins now. That thought pushed Kella over the edge. There was no way he was letting them get away with what they'd done. In a split second, Kella rushed at them, and with just one punch that's supercharged by his dad's power, he sent both mages flying into the wall behind them. The impact was so intense that cracks spread across the entire wall they crashed into. Just like their buddy before them, the two mages were either knocked unconscious for weeks or sent straight to hell. Feeling pretty confident after that, Kella stood there for a second, satisfied with how things turned out. But as the adrenaline faded, he realized something important. His body wasn't quite ready to handle all the raw power of a demon king. He'd need to work on that, and fast, if he wanted to control it properly. That's when Rin spoke up, saying it was time to get out of there. Kella agreed, and together they headed for the exit, with Kella leading the way and Rin close behind. Even though he'd always hated his father, even for the short time he lived in his castle, Kella found himself feeling a strange sense of gratitude. As they finally escaped the castle, Kella quietly thanked his dad for passing on his power at just the right moment. A few minutes later, they put a safe distance between themselves and the battlefield. Behind them, the castle was already up in flames by humans, burning brightly against the sky. Kella started glancing around, slowly coming to terms with the fact that he was really free this time, and he could become a guy who lived however he wanted. Whether he wanted to build a harem of gorgeous older women or just chill out as a single guy in some quiet countryside village, the choice was his now. He couldn't help but get lost in his own daydreams, wondering which path he should take. But just as he was deep in thought, a strange flash of lightning, definitely not an attack, suddenly appeared out of nowhere and struck him. Kella was totally unharmed but confused, having no idea what it was or where it came from. That's when Rin yelled out that it was teleportation magic and it was about to send him somewhere far away. Kella looked down at himself in disbelief, feeling his body get lighter and lighter by the second. Without thinking, he stretched out his hand and called for Rin to grab on, not wanting to leave her behind. Rin was surprised, but she didn't hesitate. She grabbed his hand as fast as she could. In the blink of an eye, the teleportation magic whisked both of them away at lightning speed, dropping them somewhere far from where they'd just been. When they finally landed, they realized they were right next to the walls of a human city, probably miles away from demon territory. The sudden change left them both shocked and a little freaked out. They couldn't help but wonder who had sent them there, and where, exactly, they'd ended up.